Do, re, mi, fa. Ya, da, da, da. That's the common Western major scale, all right. It sounds familiar, maybe normal, even predictable to many of us. But why is it so familiar, so predictable? It's because there's a pattern, maybe not one you've ever sat down and consciously studied, of the distances from one note to the next, and they're arranged the same no matter what major key we're in, if it's based on this standard Western major scale. These distances between the notes are called intervals, and these intervals are often referred to as either a whole step or half step. So what is a step? Using the Western standard major scale as our example, think of each letter as part of a staircase, which can be walked up or down. Each of the notes is on a particular step on the staircase, sometimes one immediately after the other, and sometimes with an extra step between them. If you compare this to the musical staff, the letters of the alphabet alternate between being placed on the lines and the spaces. For example, E is on the first staff line of the G treble clef, and F is on the space above that first line. G is on the next line above that space, then A is on the next space above that, and so on. So E is some length of step away from F, either a whole step or a half step, and G to A, or A to G, since steps can go up or down, just like steps on a staircase, is either a whole step or a half step. This might be easier to understand by looking at a piano or guitar, or an instrument similar to either one of those, such as vibraphone or marimba, or mandolin or ukulele. If two notes are next to each other in the alphabet or on the musical staff, but there's an extra note between them, that's a whole step. This may be easier to remember if you imagine we step over a note to get to the next note, such as in this example between G and A. So, if a whole step gets us over the note right next to the current note, what do you think it's called when it's not enough to step over the note right next to the current note? It's a half step, as we see from E to F, where there's no note between them. A half step is also referred to as a semitone, meaning half a tone. A whole step, or simply step, is also called a whole tone, or just tone. Whole step, half step, whole tone, semitone. As bonus info, these steps are also called a second, based on the fact that the starting note is the first note, and the next one therefore is the second, as we count from one letter to next in the alphabet, or one line or space to the next space or line, up or down. A minor second is equivalent to a half step, and a major second equals a whole step, since we have a note to step over between the first and the second, making it larger than a minor second. In the C major scale, which has no sharps or flats, there's a half step from E to F, since they're right next to each other with no note between them, and there's another half step between B and C. The rest of the notes next to each other have an extra note between them, so they are a whole step apart. Let's remember that, since that will help us a lot in music. Those two sets of notes are right next to each other, a half step apart. E and F, B and C. So this is the pattern of the intervals between the notes in the Western standard major scale. That's whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half step. Now we get to the fun part. All right, let's try another key. How about the key of D major? First, let's write out the letters of the alphabet. D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D. Now, let's apply the pattern of whole steps and half steps to this. It might be easier if we look at a piano and a guitar fretboard to understand which notes are sharp or flat, based on the whole steps and half steps. D to E. We step over a note between D and E, so that's a whole step, as it should be, according to the pattern. E to F. That's supposed to be a whole step, according to the pattern, but there's no note to step over between E and F, so we need to add it somehow. So our two choices are adjust the lower note E down to add a note between E and F, or move the upper note F upward to add a note between. When we lower a note, we're making the note flat or flatting the note. I know, proper English would be flattening the note, but it's often said as flatting when we're talking about music. If we flat E, it's now called E flat. So what does that look like? Wait a minute. We used to have a note to step over, but now we don't. So we only have a half step. So we can't flat E. Our other option was to raise F, or sharp it. Yes, again, incorrect English, but like flatting a note, when we're raising a note, it's often said that we're sharpening the note. You could say sharpening, but we're not making a sharper edge like a knife, so know that many musicians may say sharping. So then F becomes F sharp, because we sharped it, raising it up. If we do that, what happens? We have E and F sharp. So now there's a note between them to step over, so we now have a whole step between them. Nice. Okay, the next note is G, and we're supposed to have a half step between the third note and the fourth note. Let's see what we have. We have F sharp followed by G, and there's no note to step over, which means we have the half step we need. Perfect. Our next space should be a whole step. So do we have a note to step over between G and A? Yes. Okay. A to B. Do we have a whole step? Well, we have to step over a note between A and B, so check. Then we should have another whole step, B to C. Oh, we have no note to step over, so that's a half step. We already confirmed we have the whole step we need from A to B, so we can't move B down. We can't flat B. Therefore, we have to raise C to C sharp. Now we have that note to step over between B and C sharp. So let's look at the last interval, C sharp to D. This needs to be a half step. C sharp is right next to D, so no note to step over, so that's a half step like it needs to be. So now we've used the not-so-secret pattern of the notes in the major scale, and we see that in the key of D major, the notes are D, E, F sharp, G, A, B, and C sharp, and the octave above the starting note, D. This will help in knowing what chords are in a key, even what notes are in the chords, which is great help in writing melodies and harmonies, songs, and improvising solos. Okay, hold on. These sharps need to move over here to the key signature, since we just learned they're part of the key of D major. They're placed in a certain order. There is a video with shortcuts to understanding these key signatures, so we're going to continue on. Just to make sure it's making sense, Let's try one more key. How about the key of B flat major? So, we know that when a note is flatted, that means we drop it down to the very next note, a half step away. So, B flat is just that first note a half step down from B. Remember, B and C are normally a half step apart. So if we flat B, then we've added a note to step over, so we have our first whole step. Then we know there's not another naturally occurring half step until E and F. So we know C to D is a whole step, but then D to E needs to be a half step. Since we can't raise D to D sharp, it would remove the whole step we need from C to D. Then we have to lower E to E flat. A quick side note here. There's also another rule we haven't talked about yet. A standard major key will not have both sharps and flats. It might have no sharps or flats, which is C major, or it will have either sharps or flats. However, a song might have sharps or flats that are not part of the key to accommodate a melody, convey a mood or feeling. When they're outside the key, these sharps and flats are called accidentals, probably based on the old French meaning indicating an event or a happening, since it refers to something that happened which is identifiably different than the established pattern. That scale that we have. So, in the key of B flat, we wouldn't have even stopped to consider D sharp. The key is already a flat key just by the name B flat. Therefore, to create the half step we needed where we left off, we flatted E. Next, we need a whole step. From E flat to F, do we have a note to step over? Great! Now, we're past the two sets of notes that are natural half steps, E to F and B to C, so we know the rest will be whole steps. So since we don't need a half step until the last interval, let's skip right to it. A to B, that's a... what? Oh yes, the key is B flat. So we now have A to B flat. Is there a note to step over between A and B flat? No? Then we're done. We have the major scale note pattern, and we know which notes are flat. So now, we know why notes are made sharp or flat. It's determined by whether we're adjusting the note up, making it sharp, or down, making it flat. And if the key is a sharp key or flat key, then all the adjustments will be either sharps or flats to match the key. We know which note should be made sharp or flat based on the requirements of the pattern of intervals in the major scale. And as always, we snuck one in on you, but we didn't talk about it. The pattern of intervals is the same from one major key to the next, which is why the E major scale reminds you of the A major scale. It's a phenomenon similar to relative pitch. Since our brains can capture that pattern of the intervals, like we heard with the singers and instruments playing the first few notes of major scales in the beginning of the video. I hope this was helpful to you. There are other videos about how to know what chords are in a given key, and other videos about music, language, and other learning here on Know You Can Learn. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, click the like button and subscribe for more videos like this one. We want to help you know you can learn.